Hello everybody, and welcome to the fifth and final part of my Levers of Control or Levers of Power series. Today is the final video, and it's going to be a little bit different from all the others. There is no PowerPoint in this particular video. It's going to be me talking to you for God knows how long, and with me, as you know, drawing away. First things first, I'll be going through those four levers: money, education, religion and information, in a whistle-stop tour to remind you what they are. After that, I'll be talking about what I think has combined within those four levers to create where we are today, which is rampant individualism and consumerism. I'm then going to go into three different choices that I want to give to you. The blue pill, as you can see here, is go back to normal. Forget everything that I have gone into and accept your place in the world as a serf, a slave, someone to consistently produce and consume, and that is all that you will do, and maybe produce the next set of slaves or serfs to prop the system. Then you have the red pill. The red pill is all about winning the game, understanding what the system is there to give you, and going, no, I'm not going to be part of that. I'm going to win. I'm going to be rich. I'm going to be extremely wealthy in every single way that I can imagine. I'm going to talk about how you can do that, or at least how the elite do that, how they cement and maintain their power using these four tools that I've already talked about. And finally, last but by no means least, the white pill. The white pill is to deny both of the previous options. It is the third way. And it is to say that this third way is to deny the game completely and to create your own game, your own system, your own way of being, and how to go about doing that. So without further ado, let's get into it. Now, something that I want to explain to you all just before I get on is why I've done this. Why have I spent so much time on this project? I mean, by the end of this, it's going to be around 8 hours long, from start till end. So why have I spent so much time on it? Where's the money or whatever? Where's that coming from? Well, I wanted to create something where I could put this in front of a 21-year-old or 27-year-old or someone who wants to understand how the world works, how the world functions, and give them a choice. We go about our lives mindlessly in a state of hypnosis, not quite recognising what we're doing and how we're doing it. There's so many underlying assumptions and pieces of control which dictate what we do and how we think and how we feel. And it's rare that we're given a choice. So today, I want to give you a choice. I want to give you three different choices. So that one day you can sit back and go, yes, I made this choice. I made this bed. I made this life for myself. And it's mine. And I want to give you back that power over your life. No matter what choice you pick, I want to give you back that power. So without further ado, let's get into it. First off, let's give you a reminder of these four control mechanisms, how they work and how they control and craft society at large. First, we have money. As we know, money is not real. Remember, we make the stuff. We make it up. It's not in nature, and fundamentally, money for the longest time was a receipt. Money started as a means of creating a safe transport for precious metals, so that you could deposit all your gold within a temple, get a receipt of some sort to say it's your gold, travel to the next temple over, give them the receipt and say, I want this gold back, so that I can go about my day and my life and do all these different things as I travel as a merchant. That was what money was. But it's been taken and twisted and turned into something as a form of control. So how do most people live? Most people live in a way where they are trying to trade their time for money. So you are trading a tangible resource, your life, for something that does not exist. And once you have it, it is taxed, it is inflated, and if you have any kind of debt whatsoever, interest is added onto it in the form of usury. So what are these three things? Tax is a punishment for your productivity. So if you work really hard, guess what? You're going to have to give a portion of that to the state. Now, if we were starting a brand new country and it was all from scratch and we all felt all part of the same place, the same village, or the same town or whatever, I can understand taxes. But we don't live in that world right now. We live in a world where your tax money goes in a way to destroy you and to harm you. Because that's the place we are. We're at the end of an empire. Inflation is a tax on your savings. So your money is being devalued. How is it being devalued? Because we're able to create money out of thin air, the more we're creating, the less valuable it becomes. Which is why you can't just print more money, because inflation happens and the value of that money, the value of what you can do with that money decreases. Which is why £1 could have bought you 5 apples yesterday, £1 buys you 4 apples today. Because in comparison, let's say in comparison to the pound or the dollar, while both of these currencies are created out of thin air by imagination, they are competing against each other for how much each one of those is worth, and so they're compared. You can find out more about that by looking up currency trading. That's what that is. You're basically betting whether one currency is going to decrease or increase compared to another currency that's going to decrease or increase. That's all that currency trading actually is. And then finally, we've got usury. Now remember, if the bank and if governments are creating the principal, so the principal is the initial amount of money. So let's say they've created £100. Okay? Created £100, $100. And now, instead of saying, hey, we'll have 100 back plus the inflation rate. So if the inflation rate's 5%, we'll have 105 back, because guess what? The amount of money is going to devalue over time, so we'll just keep up with inflation. That I can understand. What they would say instead is, hey, we're going to give you 100, which the bank has created, by the way, and we want 150 back. Well, where's this 50 going to come from? Because the 100 came from when the bank created it. The 50 has to come from somewhere else. And where does it come from? It comes from someone else. That is where it comes from. So you're always in this constant competition with other people. So if this debt cycle perpetuates, it means there's always going to be winners and there's always going to be losers. And the losers are propped up to say, look, if you don't play by the rules, you're going to be a loser. You're going to lose your house, you're going to lose your home, you're going to lose everything. That is what a loser is within this system. They're a person who are used as effectively cattle, as a debt slave, to produce money which didn't previously exist, and then by the time that person is utterly riddled with debt, they're then cast out of the system. Oh, it was a bad debt. But by that time that happens, the system has already created enough of this non-existent money, which was never in the first place, to carry on propping up the system. That's how money works. There's winners and there's losers. And because there's winners and there's losers, it's used as a stick to beat you with, to keep you in line. Next we have religion. Remember, religion used to be all about animism. It was about getting closer to nature, that everything had a divine spark, everything was a connection to that divinity. Religion made you believe that in order for you to get close to this divine spark, you had to go through holy men or priests. So if you, as a normal person, wanted to get to this divine spark, you had to go through them. Right? You had to go through them. There was no other way of doing it. Now, if these people were able to convince you that the divinity is outside of yourself, it's not inside of you, it's somewhere else, and that you need these people in order to reach that divine place, then what are you willing to give them in order to get there? You're willing to give them everything. Money, power, food, resources. So religion was created as a means to control the belief system of the masses. It was a moral justification system. And it was this way for thousands and thousands of years. Until recently, we had the invention of science and technology. Now, cast your mind back to 2020 with COVID. What was the word that was used? Trust the experts. The experts. An expert is just another name for a holy person. And it's rather than trying to understand scripture, we now understand data. We live, a modern day religion is science and technology. And we're using exactly the same methods and processes, what we did 1,000 years ago as what we're doing today. But this time, the holy men aren't in robes or garbs. They're in lab coats or suits, as a pedestal is put in front of them and you're told to stay at home, trust the vaccine, and don't ask too many questions. That is the power of religion. The power of religion is fundamentally there to take away your own personal power, your own personal connection to the divine. That is the purpose of religion. It's to make you fundamentally powerless and to construct belief systems around your servitude. That is the point of religion. To disempower you totally. Education. Now, if you remember, we said that if we created a whole new education system, what would we want it to achieve? We would want it to achieve, number one, literacy. So we'd want children that are able to read and write so that they can communicate well in the real world. As we know before, from when we did information, if a child can read and write well and think well and communicate well, then they're going to be very intelligent. The second thing that we'd have is what's called traits-based learning. So that when a child leaves school, leaves the education system, they're able to know exactly what they love to do. And a child which knows what they love to do, they aren't confused. They're able to live a life in total alignment to what they enjoy. The third thing is we'd have a love of learning. The world changes every 3 to 5 years. So to have a love of learning means you're always going to stay on top of what's going on in the world. That's a great thing because it means you're able to spot signs, you're able to spot patterns. And if you're able to spot signs and spot patterns, well then guess what? Your real world experience is only going to deepen. And real world experience is the fourth thing that we would have in our own education system. Because we want children to understand how the world worked, how businesses run, how you could create news articles and how you could write better. Why wouldn't we want children to be able to do those things? And last but by no means least, creative thinking. If a child can think creatively and solve problems, then they can't possibly be enslaved. Because you want a populace that is able to understand the problems and challenges that comes up and think critically about what they see and what they experience. That is what the ideal system would be like. But it is not what the system is actually like. Because we know that actually the school system suppresses critical thinking. We know that it enables hierarchies. We know that it enforces a national identity. We know that children are produced which don't have adequate literacy skills, that don't read books, that can't express themselves. We know that children leave school confused, unaware of their hidden talents. And we certainly know that people leave school without a love of learning. In fact, they hate school, they hate reading. They're made to hate it by having obnoxious tests. So we know that doesn't happen either. And we know that a lot of people leave school without any real-world experience whatsoever, woefully unprepared for the realities of working life. So we know that the average school system does none of these things. So why is that? It's like this for the lower classes. Okay? So for the lower classes, that's what it's like. It's only for the upper classes who can afford private education, which does get these things. Now, why is that? If you are an average person, you are taught pretty much to keep your head down. Keep your head down. Society doesn't like you too much. So you don't want anyone in authority to notice you at all. So you keep your head down, keep yourself focused. But if you are a person who can afford private education, then you are taught that the whole world is a negotiation. If you know the world is a negotiation, then what do you need? You need great communication skills. You need great problem-solving skills. You need to be able to understand other people. You need to be able to understand that hierarchies aren't fixed, that you can ascend those hierarchies and do different things. You're not taught in school that you can negotiate with teachers. You're not taught in school that you can negotiate with anybody. You're just told to do what they want you to do. The whole system is created in that way, to create obedient slaves. But for those that can able to afford private education, they're given really great schooling. And that's what they're taught. They're taught that the whole world is a negotiation. That when you're in a boardroom, you need to express your views clearly. And that's how power works, for your communication ability, your ability to think. And last but by no means least, we have imagination and information. Now, this is the most recent one that we've gone over. As you know, imagination is our ability to enter into this creative space and then get something back. And then information is our ability to receive feedback from the actual world. That is separated by a left and right hemisphere of the brain. The right hemisphere is all about creativity and entering into this space, and the left hemisphere is all about our five senses and our ability to actually do things in the world, receive feedback from those things, which enables us to then reuse our imagination and then go deeper into this ether, into this creative or imaginative place where all things are. And of course, none of these other things would be possible without imagination, because it is the control key. That's what imagination is. It is the control key for everything else. Which means that all of these systems were created. They were created by a set of people who got together and said, we're going to create a system which benefits us and our families and our offspring at the expense of everyone else. Which means that if the imagination created these systems, the imagination can create better systems. That is the importance of understanding these complex systems and control mechanisms, because we as human beings have made these. We've created these. So we can create better systems. It doesn't have to be this way at all. We can shake off our shackles of 1,000 generations and make new systems, create better systems. All we have to do is enter into this sphere, enter into this place, and come back with something better. Why don't we do that? Why do we still live in a world that is corrupt, that produces bad outcomes, which has objective winners and losers? Why do we still live in that world? Well, number one, power dynamics. The people in charge of this world live a really great life. They don't want to give it up. Why would they? The second is, what do these control mechanisms create? That's what I'm going to go into right now. Now, my argument to you is that these 4 levers of control has created a self-enslavement system. And that self-enslavement system has reached its zenith, has reached the highest point it can go. And that is thanks to individualism and consumerism. Individualism is the belief that the most important unit of moral worth is the individual. It is you, there we go, it is your sister, it is your brother, it is your friends, family, etc., etc., and you're all individuals. And while you might cross over in terms of family, and you might be in a community, you might be in a country, blah, 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 your own worth, your own value as an individual is more than everybody else. That is individualism at the core. Consumerism is about continuous acquisition and consumption of goods and service. These two together create a system where you have been forced to believe that your key to happiness is to consume. And the only way to consume is to work. Now, what do you work for? You work for things. Houses, cars, watches, books. You work for things. You work for status. And the only way to have status is to, of course, guess what? We're back to it. Consume. So you consume. So because you want to consume, you work. Because you want to work, you buy things, and things get status. And in order for you to show off your status, you need to consume more. And that is how the system proliferates. Your ability to acquire things and consume, as mentioned before, affects your status. And only those of higher status can get married, can, win in life, which of course encourages people to take on debt. As we know with money, the more debt you have, the more society likes you. Because if you are in debt and if you're having to compete, it means that you are having to continuously work. I want you to see that individualism has created a world where you have been made to believe, via cultural, religious practice, that the only way for you to receive happiness is via this endless merry-go-round of consumption. This creates the illusion of choice and sovereignty, while binding you to an endless cycle of desire, debt, and dissatisfaction. And this is, of course, fueled by advertising, marketing, all trying to get inside your head, all trying to get inside this left hemisphere of the brain, trying to give you pleasure, short-term gratification over everything else. Thanks to social media, most people are exposed to hundreds, if not thousands, of advertisements daily, all to get you into this desire, debt, and dissatisfaction cycle. Individualism and consumerism combine together create superficial status. It tries to get you as an individual to associate yourself with the things that you have, and your things create your status. So you're trapped. You're trapped in this self-perpetuating cycle where you associate yourself with your ability to get things, which creates status, so that you end up in debt, consuming, putting yourself into endless paycheck to paycheck cycles to afford a lifestyle that is totally beyond the means of the many. No wonder we have such poor mental health. Because this system is the perfect slavery. It is perfect in its creation. Because this is self-perpetuating. There are no chains. There are no physical forces that's forcing you into this cycle. You are choosing it, or at least you think you're choosing it. You were born into a matrix of consumption, and from the moment you were old enough, you've been given a phone or a tablet where your mind was unready for the barrage of psychological attacks it received, so that you internalized this system. And until a person recognizes this is what is happening to them, they will forever be a slave. The world we live in is a world of short-term pleasure over everything else. But just because it gives you pleasure immediately in the short term does not make it good. It does not make it morally desirable. Everything you see here is about your immediate satisfaction. That immediate kick in the left hemisphere of the brain over the right hemisphere of the brain. As you know, the only way in which we can access this right hemisphere of creativity is by giving it space. But if your brain is bombarded with short-term pleasure-seeking activities like social media, gambling, porn, endless bread and circus, endless programming. Why do you think it's called programming on the TV, by the way? Because you're getting programmed, right? Then you can never, ever, ever access this higher reasoning. And if you can't ever access this higher reasoning, then guess what? You're going to stay a slave forever. When individualism merges with consumerism, it creates double-ended slavery, with personal freedoms redefined as a right to consume without limit, weakening both individuals and society as a whole. People become willing slaves, and capitalism demands that you keep prioritising shopping over anything else. Because what you own is the equivalent to who you are, and who you are is status, and you're willing to go into slavery in the form of debt in order to increase your perceived status. And that is, of course, where social media comes in. Social media is a way in which you to artificially inflate your status, your short-term status over your long-term health. That's all social media does. The ultimate form of slavery, the best prison, is the prison that you cannot see or feel. That's what this system is. And I believe that until we're able to understand what has been done to us, the human mind and the human capacity will never be the same again. Not to mention what is happening with artificial intelligence. Our pursuit of technology is terrifying in some ways, because it means that we're going to be more and more reliant on artificial intelligence rather than our own intelligence. And what happens? We become lazy. And when we become lazy, the brain shuts off. The brain is an amazing tool. It's a tool for energy efficiency. If we don't use something over an extended period of time, we lose it. It's that simple. If you've ever seen the film WALL-E, we get those morbidly obese fat people living in chairs. That could be the future of the human race. Total mental retardation. Because most people are willing and happy to be slaves. As long as their immediate short-term gratification is fulfilled, as long as they don't have to think too hard, as long as They can watch their sport, eat their McDonald's, enjoy their fast food. They are willing. And I don't speak as if I haven't been in this system. Of course I have. I was born into this system. I wasn't born as an elite. I'm not an elite. This has just come from years of working with people who have been born into the system. Years of work with people who weren't born in the system, who were born at a higher educational point, private schooling, and understood how they see the world. And I've reversed engineered what's happened. They see the world an entirely different way than what an average normal person sees it. An average normal person is a slave. They are used by the system to prop it up and are crushed beneath it. Now, if we as individuals are constantly competing with each other for status and ego, then we perceive each other as enemies. We atomize ourselves. We separate ourselves from our families. We remove ourselves from the greater societal whole in order to seek greater pleasure. Or we've run out of time and we work and we work and we work and we work, and then finally when we reach 60 odd, we then put ourselves within a greater society. Older people tend to then go on and engage politically because now they've got time and they can do it. But before, they were trapped in these constant cycles of work and debt and things and status, and this continual self-perpetuating system. I believe this is the point of this system, to set us against each other. And I believe that is because the system is trying to prevent collective action. Collective action is the only way in which things change. It's the only way. It is the coming together of people as a harmonious whole, directed into a single course that actually get things to occur. Now, if you are an enjoyer of elite theory is this position that you get a very small minority of people. That minority of people all want the same thing. They then harmonise, and then once they're harmonised, they're able to control many, many different things. Now, I've worked in systems like this, and I'll be honest with you, this is the case. You get organised collective action in harmony. People in harmony with one another, all for their own betterment. And guess what? They perform. They perform better than a disorganised mass. And that's the point. If everyone suddenly woke up tomorrow, none of this would matter. Because everyone would see the game that they're all playing and they'd give it up. And everything would collapse. Now, why don't the majority of people all come together and take collective action? Simple. You are taught to be risk averse. You are taught to take orders. So if the normal person is taught to be risk averse and take orders, then how is that in comparison to the elite, the wealthy? Well, they accumulate money and power together. These families stick together. They help each other in everything that they do. They create a network of elites to help each other. And these are a network of families. And they have lots of children. Lots of children. They work together. They acquire assets together. And they pass those assets and that money on to the next generation and the next. And they accumulate more and more and more wealth and more power as they do so. So how does our four levers prevent collective action. Let me go through it now. Money creates debt cycles. And if you're in debt, then you're going to feel an awful lot of shame. And shame prevents us from being honest and truthful. And if we can't be honest and truthful with others and ourselves, it prevents us from taking part in collective action. Also remember, with individualism, if you are an individual, you are encouraged to consume more, to accumulate more. That's what this money lever is able to do. Endless spending. So without collective action, it isolates the individual. It makes you as a competing unit rather than something that is combined together as part of a greater whole. And of course, consumerism ties your identity and your status with how much you can purchase, which then exacerbates this debt cycle even more. So debt cycles make collective action riskier. Because guess what? Let's say you're a teacher and you're going to strike. Maybe you can strike for a day, maybe a week. But any longer than that, you're going to fall behind on your mortgage payments. You're going to fall behind on the debt you need to pay off. It's not going to be able to work. And guess what? You have material distractions. And that hinders broader mobilisation against any kind of issues. What about religion? What religion does is that it takes what should be shared struggles and it transforms them into individual struggles. This promotes isolation because, hey, you need to remove yourself from society. You need to work on yourself, right? And if you're isolated, then you become easier to control. You become dependent and easily distracted. And of course, we all can see how education plays into this. You're taught from a very early age to think and act like a slave. That's what you do. You think and act like a slave. And again, this all would not be possible without the imagination and the information working hand in hand together. And if we can produce this system, then we can produce a better system. Fundamentally, the whole point of individualism and consumerism is to convince you that you are the problem. That is the point. The more that you can be convinced that you are the problem, the less likely you are to unite with others in a way and take collective action over the greater whole. You'll be convinced that you need drugs. You'll be convinced that you need to spend more time buying things. You'll be convinced that you need to work more, work harder to buy the thing that's going to make you happy. Well, guess what? Nothing in this world is going to make you happy. There is nothing that you can buy that will ever give you long-term happiness. Nothing. And I will stand by that until the day that I die. What gives you happiness? What has always gave human beings happiness is the things you cannot buy. It is family. Family has given people purpose. It is community. And the betterment of the community that makes people happy. It is a shared struggle. That makes people happy. And of course, it is the pursuit of the divine that makes people happy. It's not buying things. It's not consuming things. It's these things that make people happy. You can't buy a family. You can't buy shared struggle. You can't buy community. And you cannot buy access to the divine. You cannot read a book and get access to the divine. You can't just say some words. You have to go within. You have to go within yourself. You have to close off the left hemisphere of the brain and go into something deeper. You cannot buy that. You must experience it. You must do it. Okay? So there you have it. This is how the system works and makes you into a slave. Money, education, religion, and information come together and create a system of consumerism and individualism, which makes your place in society dependent on the debt that you're able to take on board. Your moral worth via the amount of stuff that you have. Your ability to get a mate based on these things. And all of that keeps you effectively a slave. And most importantly of all, it prevents collective action. What I've just described to you in these past few hours and in this past, say, 30, 40 minutes or so, the blue pill is jobs, taxes, individualism, consumerism. It's about knowing your place, watching your sport, and don't ask too many questions. With money, in 2020, this is the fractional reserve lending system that I mentioned to you earlier. With money, the banks no longer have to even hold a fractional reserve. There's no mandatory fractional reserve anymore. They don't have to hold any of your money whatsoever. This means that now more than ever, money simply doesn't represent anything but an abstraction. You trade your money for time which isn't real. Those earnings are then taxed. And what you're left with is eroded away via inflation, which is the rate in which money's perceived value decreases via money printing, money creation, which any bank or government can do. And if you're in debt, the money you owe is constantly growing, oftentimes past the principal, in order to keep you permanently enslaved and working in the system. The reason why it's so dire is because we're at the point where the Western Empire is falling, it's failing. And that's just in terms of the financial system. The working class, the middle class, are the exit liquidity. Exit liquidity is the ability for those to accumulate large sums of wealth. Because in the system to come, when it's all reorganised, I believe that you will have eternal haves and eternal have-nots. But that's probably something for another video. In education, you are not taught to communicate clearly. You are not taught to know what you're best at. You left school confused, not knowing what you wanted to do, not knowing what you wanted to be, so you were easily captured by a system which demanded you to work, which demanded you to earn in order for you to have things that you love and have things that you like. Never, ever going to be fulfilled by anything that you buy. Ever. And of course, the religious system is designed to create a belief system dependent on others or power structures to rob you of your own autonomy. All backed up again by information. None of this would be possible without information. Someone created these systems, remember that. I came up with a question, which is why hasn't the system been overturned? And the answer is really simple. Because the people want it. People want this. I genuinely believe that people want to be slaves. They want to be serfs, and they don't want to think, and they don't want to challenge their own ego. Because in order to challenge their own ego, they have to understand their position in the world. In order for me to get here, I had to recognise that I was a slave. I had to recognise that I was working for something which wasn't going to make me happy. I had to recognise that and leave the system at great personal cost. So why do I know this is the case? Because in every society where knowledge of a true nature of the world has been revealed, people have always panicked. The elites have always felt threatened. And order was threatened in the form of hysteria. I'm not going to go into historical relevance today, but why don't you just go on to Grok or go on to ChatGPT and just ask that. When has there been times where the true nature of the world has been revealed and people have panicked? You will find Galileo, you will find lots and lots and lots of other different thinkers that have been burned at the stake, buried alive, or harmed in different kind of ways because they revealed the truth to the world. And people don't want truth, they want convenience. They want something that's going to make them feel good rather than what is right about the world. All of this is creating a class of people who are totally cut off from themselves, are distracted, and totally pleasure-seeking. This is the ultimate form of these control mechanisms, is what we have today. Consumerism is the perfect slavery. You want stuff and there's always more stuff for you to want, so you trade your life for the stuff that you can't possibly be without, because what are you without stuff? That's it. That's it all summarised in a single sentence. You're poor, you're low status, and you're just plain wrong. Your whole personality revolves around owning, wanting, and buying stuff which would otherwise be meaningless. Individualism and consumerism creates the perfect slave. Because unlike regular slavery with chains and a master, which is clear, the system is clear, you're not told what you can and can't do, what you can and can't think. The system does the work and influences your behaviour, so that you never consider another option. You never know your prison until you start looking for the bars. You never know you're a slave until you start to question. And this is the reason why so many people will never wake up. Because if the prison is comfortable, then why leave? If you take the blue pill, then distraction and pleasure is the aim of the game. It is endless bread and endless circus. That is the blue pill. In the movie The Matrix, which I think is one of my favourite films, Neo is given a choice, blue pill or red pill. And the blue pill, at the end, said if you take this blue pill, you will wake up in your bed the following day and you won't remember any of this ever happening. You'll go about your life completely as normal. And at the time I thought, oh, that's quite cool. You know, they're basically saying that your mind will be wiped, your mind will reset, blah, blah, blah. And it wasn't until recently that I came to terms with something the brain does. And what the brain does is, as I mentioned before, the brain is a filtration tool. The left side of the brain is a filter. And it filters through your 5 senses. When you experience something in the world that doesn't quite fit your way of viewing the world, your brain reacts in a very interesting way. Because something doesn't quite fit within your reality tunnel, which is basically the way in which you perceive the world, I'll be going into reality tunnels a little bit later, the brain filters out this information. You forget it. You dismiss what you're seeing. You reinterpret the facts, you reinterpret the data to preserve your mental consistency. Which means the reason why so many people, the reason why this system hasn't been overturned, is because whenever a person sees or experiences something which doesn't quite fit their perceived narrative of the world, they forget it. The brain forces them to forget. The brain will just filter out anything which doesn't match its current reality. And that's when you get the emotional states. Fear and anger. Fear and anger are the 2 emotions that we feel when we experience something that doesn't quite fit our worldview. Our emotions amplify conflict based on identity rather than logic. This is what we call motivated forgetting, where stressful or incongruent memories are suppressed. It is selective avoidance and automatic erasure. That is what the blue pill means. The blue pill means that you will forget. And if you don't forget, then you've chosen a different path. And this video is all about choice. It's all about choice. This whole project is all about choice. And I want to give you a choice. Not just blue or red, but a choice about your entire life. And I want you to follow me. I want you to follow me into making a different choice. fully knowing what life is going to be like when you make this choice. You know what a blue pill choice looks like. It looks like active forgetting. It looks like a life of denial. It looks like a life of pleasure seeking. It looks like a life of continuous regret. That is the path of the blue pill. Now on to the red pill. If you take the blue pill, we know exactly what you're choosing. You're choosing a life of sleep. Being totally asleep and forgetting. You live a life of forgetting. You live a life of having your brain actively choose not to engage with the information and to filter out anything which does not fit your preconceived narrative or view of the world, your worldview. It is a life of sleep, and servitude, and slavery. What about the red pill? The red pill is the pill that the elite take. They are people who understand the game. They understand the system and how it works, and they choose to craft a life for themselves of being the leaders, the abusers of the system at the expense of the majority who take that blue pill. So how do these people play the game? How do they do it? Well, let's get into it and I'll explain exactly what they do and how they do it. Money. The most important thing for an elite person with money is that they don't use their own money. They use something called OPM, other people's money. So we're aware that it works as a fractional reserve banking system. So when you have loads of people that have taken that blue pill and they put in their money into a bank or an institution, what the wealthy do is that they then borrow that money from the bank at a low rate of interest, talking about like 5%, or even less, maybe 3.5%. And they could be borrowing as large of a sum as possible. We're talking maybe 7 figures to 9 figures from a bank or these larger institutions. Okay? So what do they do with that money? They then take that cash, which we know isn't real and they're aware it's not real, and they turn it into assets. Now these assets then back up the debt. So now the debt has something that it is... So the debt now has something hard, which it now represents. So this percentage of interest, that remains the same. But the value of these assets increases at a rate which is similar to or greater than the rate of interest. Assets hold their value. So we're looking at real estate, so property, land, businesses. All these things hold their value. And because they hold their value, it means that even if this increases, the value of these assets will increase with it. So owning an asset means that you, at a time when there is a boom or a bust cycle, when things aren't going very well and people aren't lending, well, you've got loads of assets that you can live on. But when people are lending and interest rates are low, then you can use these assets to borrow more to then, guess what, get more assets. That is how it works. These assets are what's called refinanced. They're refinanced in order to get more of this low interest debt to get more assets. Now, what happens when one of these elite families have accumulated, say, millions and millions and millions of debt. How do they do it? Well, they have something called a financial vehicle. If you're a normal person, when you borrow, it is you personally that is borrowing. You personally are borrowing the money. Right? When a rich person borrows money, it is a company. It is a business that borrows the money. And a business is a separate legal entity. So you and your business are different. So this is an elite person, okay? And this is their business. And they're two very separate things. So the business can borrow as much as it likes, and this person stays debt-free. So if the business goes under, then there is no risk, because the business and the person are two separate individuals. So if the business has maybe, £1 million worth of debt, and the business goes under, well, that debt is pretty much written off, because the person and the business are two separate entities, and this person isn't necessarily associated with this business, so that money's basically gone. That is the simplified version of it. The assets are in the business. The value of those assets, the money, then goes to this person, but if the business fails, then the debt stays in the business. It doesn't affect the person whatsoever. And this person might have multiple different businesses all doing the same thing. The lesson here is that the really wealthy don't take on debt themselves. They create financial vehicles to do it for them, to give them a degree of separation from the debt that they're accumulating. That is how they do it. But it can get even more complicated than that. And this is going to be exactly how the wealthy maintain their money and their wealth, okay? So, I'm going to call this person Mr. R. Mr. R. So Mr. R is an elite. And what he does is that, this is him personally, is that he has a business. And this business, so here we go, put this in red. This business owns lots and lots and lots of assets. Okay? Now, I've already explained that what this business is doing is this business is borrowing money from a bank. That bank is then giving the business money backed up by assets that it already owns. And these assets that's owned by the business are then making the business money. Well, that's great. But what if this business goes under? Well, what Mr. R will do is that he will have what is called a holding company. Holding companies are fascinating vehicles because holding companies don't trade. There's a difference between a non-trading company and a trading company. A trading company such as this has customers, clients, people that it interacts with. It has contracts, which means that at any time, if a customer or someone who is in contract with this business says, I don't like what you're doing with the business, I'm going to sue you, then this business has to now go and fight that in court. The holding company doesn't necessarily have any contracts with any outside body. All the holding company does is it owns this business. Owns it. Now, Mr. R probably has a multiple of these businesses. And these businesses all themselves have assets and they have clients and so many different things. Maybe they're all the same, maybe they all do property, or maybe they all do business, or maybe a mix of both. And the holding company owns all of these businesses. What are the benefits of having a holding company? Why go through all of this trouble and all of this complexity? Multiple reasons. The first one is, my favourite thing in the whole world, tax. Mr. R doesn't like paying tax. He's going to try and reduce the amount of tax that he pays. If you're a working person, your tax is taken out of your bank before it even hits your bank account. So your tax is already paid before it even lands in your bank account. The government already takes their piece, especially if you're British. Other countries do the same. Let's say that these businesses produce profit and your tax based on your profit. Well, what you can do is that your holding company can then say, well, this business made £5,000 in taxable profit. Well, the holding company can say, well, you made £5,000 in taxable profit. Well, we're going to invoice this company for guess how much money? £5,000. And this is management expenses. So now, on the books, this company no longer makes £5,000 of taxable profit. It makes zero. Absolutely zero whatsoever. Because that money goes to the holding company. Now imagine this has happened multiple times over with these businesses. Now this holding company, well that's a lot of assets that this holding company is holding on to. It's a lot of money this holding company is making. What happens then? Surely this is going to be taxed. Not necessarily. Because this holding company can do lots of different things with that money. It can take money from one business and transfer it to another. It can move money from one business to another, and it can get a business to buy other things within that business. Or it can do something else. It can move that money directly to Mr. R, and he can have that in form of dividends or stocks in this company. A stock or a dividend is different to getting paid via getting paid to salary. It's taxed differently. That means that Mr. R can receive a lot of money without having to pay himself anything and incurring income tax necessarily. But that's not quite what happens. If you're a business owner, you will know that each one of these businesses must have a director. A director is a person who is effectively legally in charge of the company. And whether these people have what we call a limited partnership, where their risk is limited, or whether it's unlimited, doesn't really matter. It has to be someone who's in charge of these companies. These people can just be accountants, or they can be employees, or anyone who signs the paper to say, yes, we're the director of these companies. The reason why that's important is because if you are a director of a company, you have rights and responsibilities to run that company properly. Mr. R isn't necessarily a director or an owner of any of these companies whatsoever. He simply owns the holding company, which means he isn't responsible for anything that these companies do. And if one company starts to go bankrupt or it goes under, before this company is labelled as bankrupt, he can transfer all of these assets to the holding company, and then from the holding company, he can put it into another vehicle. This company might have accumulated millions of pounds worth of debt. It might have accumulated hundreds of thousands of pounds worth of taxes it needs to pay. But when it goes bankrupt, well, you can no longer pay back what you owe. This business can no longer pay back what it owes. And because it no longer has any assets, those assets are transferred to this company, there's nothing that you can do. Now imagine doing this over and over and over and over and over again. That is how this system works for the super rich and the super elite. They have these systems to insulate themselves from risk. But why stop at just a holding company? This is where you can have another vehicle called a trust. A trust is another layer of separation. A trust owns the holding company. And what this trust does is another financial and legal vehicle to separate Mr. R from what's going on. Mr. R would be what's called a beneficiary. A beneficiary is someone who's able to take money out of this trust and live off it. The great thing with a trust is that if Mr. R isn't in charge of the trust, he can employ a different business and they manage the trust for him. So he employs these, or technically the trust employs these. They manage the trust manages the holding company manages all these different businesses, and it means that all of these assets, which we know are real and tangible and are worth something, like land or a business or clients, whatever it is, the real tangible assets constantly move around, never being touched by anyone who wants any money for them or from them, to different business vehicles. All of the profit is funneled upwards to a holding company. That is then funneled to a trust, and in order to avoid paying tax on any money made, the money then goes from the trust to Mr. R as a beneficiary. All being managed by an entirely different body. So Mr. R, he has absolutely nothing to do with what goes on whatsoever. He has got 1, 2, 3, 4 layers of insulation from debt. Mr. R has no personal debt. Mr. R has no personal issues with money. It's all down here. All of it. Each one of these businesses borrowing cash from other businesses, or from banks, or from governments. Each one of these businesses then uses that money and turns it into assets. Those assets maintain their value. And when the business no longer functions appropriately, or someone sues the business or the company, they then transfer those assets to the holding company and they move them around. So the business becomes worthless. And if you try and sue a worthless business, you make no money. You make nothing. This is how the elite use money. This is how they do it. They create financial vehicles using other people's money. All of these businesses, they're being propped up by your money that these businesses are borrowing. This is how, if you take the red pill, this is how you win. This is how you win financially. You create vehicles that accumulate debt. Then you transfer the assets, which are real, from the vehicle to another one. You declare the business insolvent. So you declare it, this business isn't working anymore, sorry. Which removes the debt while the asset remains. Of course, the debtor might challenge this in court, but then guess what? The company that has the best lawyer wins. And in most cases, it never even gets that far. There's a saying, if you borrow $1 million, that's your problem. If you borrow 100 million, that's the bank's problem. What does that mean? It means that the smaller amount of money that you borrow, the more leverage the bank has over you to screw you. The more you borrow from the bank, the more leverage you have over them for better terms of borrowing. Right? They don't want to write off £100 million or $100 million. They don't want to write that off. So they will enable you to do this as long as you keep paying back your percentages. This is how the game is played. They will have friends inside banking and government institutions that will enable them to keep doing this as long as they pay their bit. They pay a little bit here, a little bit there. But this is just to screw over the little people. They keep their friends happy. Okay? If you want to seriously make money, if you want to seriously make money, and by the way, this was one of the first ways I ever learned about making serious money. There's a guy called Dan Penner. You can look on YouTube. He has a way in which you does this. He calls it the quantum leap, quantum growth. And what he does is he buys businesses. Now, the way you can buy a business without any money down is through something called seller finance. Seller finance is when this is a business and this is the owner of the business. And let's say that he is, say, 70. So he's old. And he's got no children. And he doesn't want to run the business anymore. So you can come along and you can say, right, I will buy this business from you and I'll run it. But rather than me giving you cash for this business, I will instead run this business on your behalf and I will give you money each month or each year until my debt is paid off. And as long as cash flow covers debt service, you have a business that's going to produce you lots and lots and lots of money. Cash flow is the amount of money that you produce per month. Debt service is the amount that you owe. So if you're producing £10 per month and your debt service is £5, then you've got £5 to keep. You're paying back the £5 debt. It's that simple. That's called a seller finance deal. Imagine if you've got a mate, right, who owns a business and you've got this big, massive financial vehicle, lots of different financial vehicles with holding companies and trusts and everything else. Well, you could say to your mate, we're going to value your business at, say, £1 million. Well, why don't I give it you for £1, and then you can just pay me £1.2 million over the next 5 or 10 years. Well, that is a debt, right? You're paying back the debt, and debt can be written off in terms of tax as well. That's how the game is played. You also have something called private equity. Private equity is when you take other people's money. Private equity. It's when you take other rich people's money. There we go. And then you invest. Normally in businesses. Again, these people don't use their own money. They use other people's money. Other people's risk. That's the point. They never use their own money. It's always other people's money. That's the big learning you've got to make here. The elite don't use their own money for anything. They use other people's money. Because money isn't real. It's never been real. It's created. It's created as a way to buy up real, tangible assets which appreciate in value rather than depreciate in value. And if you really, really, really wanted to make loads of money, then you go for government contracts. Because governments do literally create money out of thin air. This is just an infinite money glitch, as if you can get like a government contract. Slush money is what it is. What is the belief system of the elite? Well, number one, it's not individualism and it's not consumerism. They reject this entirely. The financially wealthy, the financially literate, they reject the notion altogether. And instead, their view is network. These people do work together. They do work together. They do take collective action. 100% they take collective action. They pay good money to enter into networks of people where they can associate with existing and growing networks. Because they know that your network seriously is your net worth. Opportunity comes from who you know. And the more people that you know, the more deeper those relationships, the better you will be, the better off you'll be financially and in every way of life. The belief system, if you seriously want to become one of these elites, then you need to understand their belief system. So if you're poor, if you're in poverty, that is evil. Okay, that's wrong. You're a bad person if you're poor or in poverty. But if you're rich, wealthy, strength, power, all these are good. Being rich, being wealthy, strength and power, these are moral goods. And you should do whatever it takes to accumulate strength and power. If you have friends who are poor, throw them away. If you have family which are getting in your way, throw them away. You must make it. No matter who you have to crush, you have to make it. You have to use and abuse people in order to make it. Exploit people in order to make it. It doesn't matter who you have to hurt as long as you win. Victory at any cost. That is the belief system of these elites. Now, I'm probably going to do another video about these belief systems of the elites. For now, this is all we really need to know. But just consider, how do the elites stay loyal to one another? Have a little think about that. How does the education system work for the elite? Well, first things first, they want to have lots and lots of children. Okay? Lots and lots of children. Because they need to pass on that what they've built to someone else. So they want to have lots of children, as many children as possible. Because the more children that you have, the more likely they are going to work in the interest of the family. Their education system is all about two things. The first thing is, guess what? Achieving all of the things that you would do if we create a good education system. Good communication, knowing how to negotiate, knowing how to think critically, all these things, right? That is what their education is about. And the second thing it's about is networking. They send off their children to elite schools where you have other elite children to network. Because if they all know each other, then it's easier for them to get on. It's easier for them to get along in life. So we have an actual education system that, funny enough, works, networking, and how to use and utilise power. These children are taught that it is their right to use and utilise power. And if you are brought up knowing this, then you will use and utilise power without any kind of issue whatsoever. Because you will put your family first, always. Always. So fundamentally then, what is the difference between the blue pill and the red pill? There's two differences. The first one is that the blue pill is fully asleep. Fully asleep. You have to reject the notion that you can have what the red pill has. Reject it fully. You must view your place in the world as unchanging. These people have a mindset which stays exactly the same. I know my place. I'm going to stick in my place. I can't possibly have any more. That is the mindset of the blue pill. And in fact, even having more than what I currently have is evil and it's wrong. And I don't want to associate myself with anyone who has more than me. Because I feel insecure. The battle here with the blue pill is the ego. Right? It's asleep and the ego. And you, of course, you're at the bottom rung of this ladder in the system or the game. Now, if you're a red pill, you're aware. You're aware because you know how the game is played. You know exactly how the game is played. You know exactly what you need to do to climb up the ladder in this system, in this game. Now, if you are aware, and if you're climbing this ladder, you're going to be rewarded financially. But unfortunately, how long can you stay at the top? There are more people coming up the ladder for you. So in order for you to focus on the material world, you have to reject any kind of awareness of anything that isn't material. You might have a really wealthy life, a life full of luxury, but you are still a slave. You're still a slave to the system. You've just climbed the ladder. You're just its favourite. That's it. That's all you are. Just its favourite. But in time, that will pass and you'll go back down. Notice how I didn't say ruler or king. You're just a favourite. The system uses you to prop itself up as you use the system. And the system won't change. It won't change. The system will simply change you. That's how it works. The system won't change, the system will change you. And the more and more and more that you sacrifice at the altar for this material world, the more you'll change. Because a big thing that people say is, oh, why can't I just climb this ladder and then I'll change the world, I'll change everything. Because in order for you to climb, you must sacrifice parts of yourself to do it. And by the time you reach the top, you are unrecognisable from who you are. And the only way to do this, and if you seriously want to do this, is to develop a split personality. This is the only way that people are able to do this. They develop a split personality. So when they're forced to do some pretty horrific things to climb this ladder, to win in this system, well, they can only justify it by splitting off their personality so another person does it. Right? Or another side of them, another part of them. If you've ever met somebody who is climbing this ladder who is an elite, they're fractured. They're fractured individuals. They've got 2 parts or 3 parts or 4 parts of them. And they're different in different situations, in different environments. That's because they've got a split personality. And they've developed that in order to maintain and keep power. But notice, in both of the blue pill and the red pill, you're still inside this system. You're still within it. You're still a slave to this system. It's just in this instance, you're the favourite. You're earning lots of money. You've got lots of material things. But just because you've got lots of material things doesn't mean that the issues stop. You're still fighting for power. You've got so many more people trying to get to your position. So much more stress. That even if you're at the lowest ebb, the bread line, your stress that you're experiencing is probably going to be the same. They say more money, more problems. Well, yeah. I mean, just talking personally, when I've worked in politics, the MPs, the people at the top, and I'm going to talk about British politics here, but I'm sure it's the same in all countries, they're massively stressed. Because not only do they have to have a lot of energy and effort expended to keep things up, to keep things going, they've got loads of people trying to betray them to get to this top spot, to get this power. It's extremely stressful, extremely difficult to do. Now, just FYI, right, and I want to make this really clear, I don't believe that money or education or information, I don't believe any of these tools are inherently evil. I don't believe a belief system is inherently evil or money is inherently evil. I don't. I don't. I don't want you to reject these things. These things are just as they are. You know, these are the tools. It's how we use the tools that matters. It's like electricity, right? In the hands of someone who knows how electricity works, they can produce amazing equipment, computers, phones. I can communicate to you in a way that's hopefully going to help you and change things for your life. Or in other person's hands, it can electrocute people and harm people and kill people. That's all this is. It's power, electricity, energy. I don't blame these tools for what they do. I blame the people using them and the systems created with them. Look, the fact is we need money. We need an exchange of value. Money isn't inherently evil. It's how it works is inherently evil. Like usury is inherently evil because you create winners and losers. There'll always be people in poverty when usury is used as a system. 100%, no doubt about it. So, all this is to say is that the blue pill is you're asleep, you're ego-driven because you want to reject anything that doesn't fit with inside your way of viewing the world. And the red pill, well, you've got money, you have wealth, but the cost is your sanity. The cost is that you must reject anything that isn't material. Because as soon as you start to think, well, maybe there's more to the world than just the material, you lose your status and your position. And by coming to this ladder, by coming up to this position on this ladder, you feel like you've accumulated too much. You can't turn back. You're all in. You're all committed. And you do worse and worse and worse things to maintain your position, and you justify it by having a split personality. These are the two options that's normally presented to you. But today, I'm going to present to you a third choice. And this choice is about freedom. And this different way, this third way, is the white pill. Before I get into the white pill or the white option, the big key here is to wake up. It is an awakening. The blue pill is a rejection of the truth out of ego, out of a closed mindset, out of fear of what you could really be. The rejection of the blue pill over the red pill still keeps you equally enslaved. You're just two very different parts of the ladder. Now, it's very easy for me to say to you, reject money, reject wealth, right? Reject the world. But I do not believe that the world is inherently a bad place. I believe that the world is equal parts joyous, vindictive, beautiful, ugly, challenging, easy. It's all these things and so much more. But you don't see that unless you've actually taken part in it. To reject what you've never experienced leaves you open and vulnerable. To reject that what you know is like understanding an animal. If you know the animal, you know what tricks it will pull. If you know the animal, you'll know what tricks it'll pull to try and trick you, and you can prepare for them. I've told you this before, but I'll repeat it again. I want you to get everything you want in life. I want you to engage in the world. I want you to seek pleasure and joy in the world outside of yourself. I want you to accumulate money. I want you to engage in pleasure-seeking behaviours. I want you to, get on your phone and get on Instagram and Facebook and all these different things. I want you to do that. Why? Why do I want you to do that? Because eventually you will realise that there is nothing in the world that will ever fulfill you totally. You will be hungry forever. You will chase forever. And you will chase that which is external from you. Now, the whole point of this video is that I want you to choose. If you want a life of constant chase, then choose it. Go all in. Risk it all. Enjoy the excitement and rack up the cash, the debt, the power. And then one day, someone hungrier than you will come by and eat you up too. Or worse, you'll meet someone like me who just doesn't care about the money and the power and the ego. Just doesn't care. And the reason why I don't care is because I'm playing an entirely different game. I'm playing my own game. So what is it that I'm offering you that's different? If you reject the game completely, and just FYI again, I don't think you should reject money. I don't think you should reject religion. I don't think you should reject education. I think you should understand what they mean. Understand what they are. Understand the game so that you can play your own game. I want you to re-educate yourself on truth. I want you to use money as a means of freeing yourself and those that you love and those that you care about from a life of object servitude, one way or the other. I want you to reject anyone who tells you that they can communicate to the divine, but you cannot. You can. You don't need someone else. And you can have a connection to a higher power, to the divine. I want you to use your imagination for good, to create your own story, craft your own life. If you can think of a system, then you can implement it. All of these systems are not inherently evil, and neither is having or owning money, or even taking care of your family, or going into education, re-educating. None of these things are evil or wrong. They're just energy. They're just energy. And how you use that energy defines you. I don't want you to waste your life. A wasted life is just as sad as a life spent in the pursuit of the material. Both of these paths are on the same ladder. You're still playing the same game. And they will both lead to disappointment. So what is my offer to you? I want you to lead a life that is active and conscious in the pursuit of your purpose. To be active is to be awake. You are an active participant in this life that you're crafting for yourself. To live a life in the pursuit of your purpose, that is to be directed. And finally, to live a conscious existence means to connect to the higher self. What does it mean to live an awake, directed life in that connection to that higher self? Well, firstly, it means that you are rejecting this ladder. Okay, you're rejecting this entirely. That's the first thing. It means that you are going to create your own game. That you are going to be an active participant in your own way of living and your own way of going about your life, whatever that means. Let's now go on to each one of these. What does it mean to be awake? In order to answer that question, I've got to introduce you to a number of authors and a number of concepts. One of which I've already introduced you to, which is the map of consciousness. The other two are Timothy Leary and Robert Anton Wilson. Timothy Leary came up with what was called the 8-circuit model of consciousness, and it was a psycho-evolutionary framework. In order to understand what it means to be awake, I have to introduce you to a number of authors. The first of which is someone called Robert Anton Wilson. Robert Anton Wilson authored a few books. The most important one for me is this one called Prometheus Rising. Prometheus Rising utilizes a concept called the 8-circuit model. The 8-circuit model was published in the 1970s by an author called Timothy Leary. The concept is that we are, one, in bodies or beings which are in an evolutionary process, and secondly, we have a consciousness. And while we are simultaneously physical, we're also simultaneously spiritual. It's harder and harder and harder to deny that spiritual connection. And our human experience is changing. Now, that 8-circuit model of consciousness is both evolutionary and psychological. He describes circuits as reality tunnels. A reality tunnel is a way in which you view the world. So this is your tunnel, okay? This is how you view the world. Now, inside this tunnel might be a number of concepts, okay? There might be your family, money, just everything that's in this tunnel. Now, if something tries to get into this tunnel and you reject it, then guess what? That is an ego problem. You're rejecting a new concept or a new thought. Now, what Robert Anton Wilson, let's call him Raw for now, what Robert Anton Wilson was trying to get at with the 8 circuits in this book, the Prometheus Rising, he talks about the fastest way for a human being to reach enlightenment is to expand our reality tunnel, to incorporate new concepts, to incorporate new thoughts and ideas and positions of different people so that we can understand better. So this model conceptualized that the brain and the mind were running off of 8 circuits. So these were all interconnected together, and each one has different levels of awareness representing a stage in evolutionary development and personal growth. So these circuits aren't strictly anatomical, but more metaphysical, metaphorical. They're layers of neurological programming that process information, that shapes behaviour, and that filters our reality. So of these 8 circuits, the first 1, 2, 3, 4 are what we call terrestrial. And terrestrial basically means our world. So they are for survival and adaptation in the physical world. And these circuits are mainly imprinted. An imprint is you're basically stamped onto them in childhood. Now circuits 5, 6, 7 and 8 are post-terrestrial or extraterrestrial, meaning that they are outer world. To say that these processes are to prepare us for a life basically off planet. And these involve expanded states of consciousness, like creativity and unity. And you can reach these higher states via, guess what? Psychedelics, meditation, hemisync, and just all the things that I've already told you about. Now, this model surmises that most people are operating on these lower levels. They're operating on the primary lower circuits due to societal conditioning. And that means that they're able to lead a mechanical existence, mechanical robotic existence. So in order to awaken these higher circuits, it takes deliberate effort to reprint these 4 circuits to give way to higher levels of consciousness, higher levels of thinking. That you must reprogram your mind, fostering flexibility, optimism, and evolutionary potential. Now, what are these 8 circuits? I'm going to go through them with you now. So, the first circuit is the oral biosurvival circuit, and it's rooted in even single-celled organisms. Early vertebrates like fish-like ancestors. It corresponds with the reptilian brain or the brain stem in human neurobiology. It's all about survival and security, approach avoidance, fight or flight. And it's formed very much in infancy with oral experience, so nursing, dependency on a mother and a father. Positive imprints create trust and security, and negative imprints lead to paranoia, anxiety, addiction, or safety. Or an oral fixation if you're a Freudian. Now, the reality tunnel here, remember we're talking about reality tunnels, is a safe or unsafe. That's the filter. Okay, so a person at this level is someone who fundamentally feels very much unsafe in the world, or very safe in the world. Now, if you feel safe in the world and your immediate needs are met, then you get to transition to that second circuit. If you feel unsafe, you are going to react in different ways to stimuli, anger, rage, fear, all kinds of different responses. But this is the first circuit. The second circuit is mammalian. So it's linked to the limbic system, or the emotional part of the brain, or I call it dog brain. Right? You see this a lot in dogs. It's all about social hierarchy and emotional signaling. So this is where you can establish dominance, territory, emotional bonds. It handles power dynamics, status, group roles, submission or dominance in packs. Now, this is imprinted during being a toddler. It's imprinted when you are starting to venture out into the world, when you're trying to figure out how it works. You get to start to understand what authority figures are, parents, teachers. They shape this imprint. You either foster submissiveness or rebellion, egalitarian or... So an authoritarian imprint can foster submissiveness or rebellion, or an egalitarian one can imprint confidence. Now, someone who has this reality tunnel as a primary reality tunnel is about winners and losers. It's about hierarchy, up, down, winner, loser. So circuit 3 is dexterity and symbolic or symbolisms. Now, this was created during early hominids, basically us human beings. And it's all about that left hemisphere of the brain, or the neurocortex left hemisphere of the brain. It's about logic, it's about abstraction, it's about symbol manipulation, language, logic, tool making. It enables planning, reasoning, categorization, and it looks at world through maps, models, and words. Again, this is activated in childhood via education and language acquisition. So schooling and cultural norms imprint rigid thinking, binary logic, A or B. Right? It's about intellectual analysis, debate, invention. At this level, in your reality tunnel, it's all about map or territory. So map or territory. It's about abstracting things as labels. So you start to label things. Okay? And this is where your symbols override your direct experience. And then finally, you've got circuit 4. This is your socio-sexual or moral circuit. Now, this is linked to civilized societies involving the right neocortex. That's for empathy and ethics, how we deal with other people. It's about social integration, morality, reproduction, role-playing in tribes and families, and it governs guilt, shame, and ethical codes to create group harmony. All about harmony. Okay? Behaviours here are parenting, mating rituals, conformity to taboos. Imbalances lead to repression, hypocrisy, or fanaticism, right? Moral crusades. Now, the moral filter here, Now, at this point, the reality tunnel, the main reality tunnel here, is good and bad. It's a moral filter. Now, I want you to see how the majority of people are operating consistently at these 4 levels. People are aware they're either safe or unsafe. People are aware that they're where they are in a hierarchy. People are aware of what something is. If I say this is a phone, then you have lots of ideas what a phone is. It's a label for what this is. Or blue or red. And then finally, I have a moral filter. What's right and what's wrong. Most people are operating within these 4 circuits only And when there is dysfunction within each one of these, well, we must ascend and work on those issues. You can also see here that this fits quite well with the life stages of growth. This one is baby, toddler, child, and adult. Which means that the other 4 circuits, 5, 6, 7, and 8, well, they go beyond our biology. Because remember, this isn't just about our biology, it's also about that spiritual side of things. We're simultaneously physical, biological beings, leading physical, biological lives, while also having a connection with something greater than ourselves. And our ability to tap into that directly affects the outcome of our life. So what are the other 4 circuits, these higher circuits? So circuit 5 is the neurosomatic or hedonic circuit. Now, this is when you go beyond survival. Remember, the first 4 circuits were all about survival. This is all about flow. When you enter into a flow state, you have no care, no concern about your physical existence. It's all about your creativity and the mind and body unity. So what does that mean? It means that when you enter a flow state, when you've got no concerns of those lower levels, you enter into this sort of peak or a higher state. And that higher state can be when you're actively engaged with something that fulfills you. Or you can have an artistic flow. Or you have a what we call a peak experience. A peak experience is something where you genuinely just feel so intoxicated with endorphins. Oh, this is just amazing, an amazing feeling, right? It's where life becomes a source of constant joy, not just utility. You're not just going about the motions, getting more cash and more money. No, there's this connection, this joy, and it feels great. And again, you can get this when your physical needs are fulfilled, your basic physical needs are fulfilled, and you can get it by meditation, breath work. Even sensory deprivation can do it as well. Like low doses of psychedelics can do this too. So that is C5. So at circuit 6, this is where we come into the collective unconscious. So in my previous videos, I've talked about that information field and getting access to that. Well, this is the start of that process. It's drawing on your ability to access memories and events and information that you wouldn't necessarily have access to. Now, this model talks about it as basically DNA memory. There's memory within the DNA. There's genetic archives that you can have access to. And that comes in the form of intuition. Now, the reality tunnel here is about pattern seeking. Patterns through history. You start to see archetypes. And you start to pierce the veil. You start to understand that it's not just our physical plane. It's about something else is going on. And as you move into this state, you can get into here by heavy doses of psychedelics, deep meditation, near-death experiences. You begin to get visions. If you're living at this level, you start to get synchronicities. Artists and prophets typically operate at around this level of C5 and C6. Now, C7 and C8, they're harder for me to explain to you. Now, the reason why it's hard for me to explain them to you is because I haven't necessarily personally experienced these circuits before. So I can only go off of what I've read and what other people have told me. So C7, that is all about what they call neuroelectric. That basically means that you have what's called a meta level awareness. So you effectively become aware of all the things that's happened in your life and previous lives of your family, and your brain can start self-hacking. So it can hack itself and start reprogramming itself. It can observe and stay separated on lower circuits. And again, you can get here by really advanced meditation, high dose of psychedelics. It's about detaching from the ego. So you can have basically ego death at this point. And you start to not only know, but understand that reality really is a construct. Now, circuit 8 is what he calls the non-local quantum circuit, right, or the overmind. This is effectively oneness, total connection to the one, an ego death complete, and you're able to unify with everything, that infinite intelligence. Now, I have mentioned an infinite intelligence before. I've mentioned your mind, your brain, and that your mind is your brain and your body. That gets to access this information field, and beyond this, the information field, there is the one, that one being, which is the all. Right? That is that level. I have no experience really with these levels, but it's important for you to know what they are. And the reason why it's important for you to know what they are is because the next person I want to introduce you to is someone called Georgy Ivanovich Gurdjieff. Gurdjieff is one of, in my view, one of the most influential thinkers of the 20th century when it comes down to a spiritual life or a purposeful, awakened existence. He came up with a worldview which combined both Eastern mysticism and Eastern ways in which to come to enlightenment, and combined it for a Western audience. And he brought it back to Europe after 20 odd years worth of travel and experience. Gurdjieff coined what was called the fourth way. But in order to understand what the fourth way is, you first need to understand what the previous three ways are. They are the way of the fakir, the way of the yogi, and the way of the monk. The way of the fakir is the way of the body. So what a fakir would do is that they would do... Oh my god, looks like a penis. What a fakir would do is that they would do immense feats of willpower. You know, they would hold up their arm for months, years, in fact, and they would never let it down. They had intense physical mastery, and they worked on the body. Then you have the monk. The monk put themselves in isolated communities, and they worked on the emotions. Because a monk wanted to find enlightenment via faith, via devotion. They would ask every single day, God, what do I need to do? Show me what I need to do. And they'd go out their day trying to center themselves on those emotions, demonstrating their faith through prayer, through ritual, and a communal religious life. Once you became a monk, there's no more going out. You're a monk for life. And they cultivated the emotional center, or the feeling. And finally, you have the yogi. The yogi emphasizes the mind, knowledge, and they used meditation and study as a way to grow the intellect. These are the previous three ways. Now, what are the problem with these three ways? Well, obviously, each one focuses on a particular area. The fakir focuses on the body, the yogi on the mind, and the monk on the emotions. But let's say if you're a fakir, then you have reached enlightenment. Well, now what? You've got no idea what it is that you are receiving, what enlightenment that you can give to others, because you've got no idea really how that interacts with the world. If you're a monk, great, you've reached spiritual enlightenment, but you can't share it with anybody. You live a life of total devotion in a very small conclave of other monks, so you can't share it with anybody. And also, you've got no real connection with the outside world. So how is it going to be of any use? How is it going to help anybody else? It won't. And finally, you have the yogi. Yes, a yogi would be very intelligent, but how are they going to actually interact with the world when they've got no experience of the physical and they've got no experience of the emotional? They still might overreact. They still might react to things poorly, negatively. So each one of these focuses on one centre over the others, one area of the others. Sometimes, by the way, if a yogi recognises that a fakir has achieved enlightenment, say, early, then they will bring them in as a yogi and also teach them about intelligence. So they'll be able to go out into the world and start talking about what it is that they're able to do. By the way, how fakirs did these extreme acts of physical might, is that even they don't know how they did it. They joined these fakir groups, which they went under intense hypnosis, intense sort of unconscious reprogramming, and even they don't understand how they do it. They just understand it's what they do. So when a fakir reaches that enlightenment state, the yogi then improves their intelligence. They can understand why they're able to do it or how they've been able to do it. So these are the three traditional ways. Now what Gurdjieff did is that he took these three traditional ways, the way of the body, the way of the way of the mind, and the way of the emotion, and he created a fourth way. And that was the development of these three centres simultaneously. It's also called the way of the sly man. Now, a sly man is someone who, for some reason, shouldn't have access to this information, shouldn't have access to this knowledge. They get it from maybe a book they picked up, or maybe it was handed down to them, or maybe they stole it from someone else. That's what it means to be a sly man. And Gurdjieff certainly was a character. He led a fascinating life, a truly fascinating life. And no doubt about it, he went on to create a spiritual system which has enabled many people to reach a state of enlightenment. Now, what is then the fourth way? Well, we know it's about combining these three centres together. But what is a centre? A really great analogy for this is, let's say that you enter into a house with lots and lots of doors. And behind each one of these doors is a room. Now, let's say that you have a key for one of these rooms. Okay? But as you enter the room, there is a large chest. Okay? It's a large chest. Now, if you don't have a key to this chest, then what's the point in entering the room? Or let's say that you try and enter into one of the rooms, but you don't have the key for the room, but you have the key for the chest. Or let's say that you have the key for the chest and you have the key for the room. But once you open the box, you've got absolutely no idea what is inside it or how to interpret what is inside of it. It's only when you have both keys and the knowledge and the insight to understand what's in the box that you can actually get something out of the experience. That is the fundamental principle of the fourth way, that you must work on all three centres at the same time. so that you may enter the room, open the box, and understand what's in it. But now we've gone over that, what actually is a centre? Well, a centre is quite metaphorical. It's not actually something physical in the body. You can't find them if you looked for them. But there are two other, what we call lower centres. There's mind, body, emotion. There is sexual, and then there is instinctive. We all know that mind, body, and emotions are. The sexual centre is our reproduction, and the instinctive centre is our automatic biological processes. Heartbeat, digestion, breathing, temperature regulation, the five senses. That's what they are. Okay? So, the first principle for Gurdjieff is that each one of these centres, well, we have a preference for each one of these centres. So, if you have a body preference, you're going to be really great at sport. If you have a mind preference, you're going to be really great at learning and developing. If you have an emotional preference, then you're going to feel very, very deeply about all kinds of different things. So each one of these centres, if it needs to be developed, it requires something different. The other thing that Gurdjieff introduced within his system is a process called self-remembering. Self-remembering is the process of staying conscious, staying awake within these centres. So just try it. When you're going about your day, just try and stay present with yourself. Try not to lose yourself in the moment. Try not to lose yourself when you're going about and doing something. Just try and stay focused. Try and stay centred. And you'll find it is really, really difficult. It's really hard. But self-remembering is the start. Because once you're able to self-remember, you're able to understand what each one of these centres does, how it controls you, what preferences it has, where you move to when you have a problem. Now, he called these five centres lower, the lower centres. Now, the reason why he described them as lower centres is because for ordinary people, while we are operating within them, we're totally unaware of how they're operating. In fact, more often than not, they operate in disharmony. And if the centres are in disharmony and we're not aware of how they're operating, then he described that as mechanical. But if you are modern day, you'd be an NPC or a robot. So if we bring this together, it means that in order for you to harmonise these centres, it means that you stop being an NPC or a robot. But the majority of people are mechanical. They live life mechanically. They live life in such a way where they have no idea what it is that they're doing or why they're doing it. Now, until we're able to harmonise these centres, we're never going to ascend to higher levels of consciousness. Now, Gurdjieff mentioned two other higher centres, and they are the higher emotional and the higher intellectual. And once again, these two centres described by Gurdjieff are all about going beyond. They're about going to the divine, they're about experiencing oneness, much like what was talked about with those circuits in the circuits model. Exactly the same thing. Let me give you a quick little analogy on these centres so that you can get a clear understanding of how they work and how they function. Let's say that you go into an old stately home. Okay, you go into that old stately home, and in an old stately home, you've of course got servants. Sadly, these servants aren't quite in the right places. You've got the maid. She's in the garden. Tends to the garden. You've got the gardener. And he's tending to the horses in the stables. You've also got the cook. And the cook, well, weirdly, the cook is out polishing the staircase. So all these people are working, but they're working in completely the wrong places, not suited for their roles. So the first thing we need to do is we need to put these people in the right place. The maid needs to be on the staircase so she can polish the stairs. The gardener needs to be in the garden. The cook needs to be in the kitchen. These people need to be aligned, moved, and they must stay there. And eventually, over time, when all these people are in the right place, a head butler will appear or will be elected. Now, that head butler basically means one of these centres will be determined to be the one which will have the most power, the most control. Now, over time, after this head butler has kept everyone there, kept everyone working in this house, sooner or later, the master will appear. Now, if I was to turn this into psychological babble, the head butler is when you stop doing all this work intentionally, creating great effort. It moves into subconscious, it moves into habit. The head butler is basically a habituation, creating habits. The master is our higher self. Because the master will decide what the house is for. What is the purpose of the household? Yes, it's serving the master, but what is the purpose of the household? How is it going to serve the master? How is the higher self going to restructure the home for a greater purpose? So until you're able to get to this master, you really live effectively a purposeless life. That is what Gurdjieff was saying. Until you're able to align these centres, you're going to remain a robot. You're going to remain unconscious. I'll tell you a quick personal story. I drive, and for the longest time I would get so annoyed and so irritated by people when they cut me up or when they, turn without indicating, all these different things. And when I started to get into Gurdjieff, I stopped getting emotional about it. I stopped reacting. So I recognised that, number one, I was simply reacting robotically, mechanically to a stimulus, which was silly. And number two, that person in the car was also being mechanical. They were just continuing to go about their day without thinking about it too. So we were both mechanically reacting to one another via these centres which neither one of us had any real control over. So now whenever that happens to me, I laugh. I let it go. Because in that moment, I get to choose whether I become awake and conscious of what is actually happening. And that's what I choose to do. I become awake, I become aware of what's actually happening. And I try my best to self-remember. Self-remembering is hard. It's really hard. Sometimes I'll go a couple of days without remembering myself. Other times, I can go, hours and hours and hours on end within that mode of consciousness, with, staying present and still within myself. But it's hard. It's really difficult. And it's a lifetime of practice to get that quite right. To get that as you need it. So just to be clear, the way that you can reach these higher centres is by self-remembering and elevating these lower centres and harmonising them within the body. And harmonising them. The only way you can harmonise them is by self-remembering and observation. By spending lots of time doing that, you can reach a harmonised, real being. No longer mechanical, but it takes time, a lot of time. Hopefully, you can see the similarity between this Gurdjieff's model of consciousness, Gurdjieff's model of being awake, and the 8th circuit model. It's 7 centres rather than 8 circuits, but you can see the similarity. Now, there's one last author I want to introduce you to, and this is someone you've met before. It is Dr. Hawkins. I've spoke about power versus force. I've spoke about the map of consciousness already in depth, so I'm not going to repeat myself. But just to go into it really quickly, these lower levels of emotional states keep you here. These higher levels help move you up. Once again, this is all about the lower centers, the lower circuits, staying at that point, not enabling yourself to stay still and to think. And this is all about moving past those lower centers, those lower circuits. Hawkins, for me, took both of those systems and put in the missing piece. He took Gurdjieff, he took Leary, he put them together and he gave the missing piece as the map of consciousness. It's by moving these emotional states, staying still, being with ourselves, that enables us to move up, to awaken properly. Because what we're trying to do is to awaken. We must awaken. We must awaken. We must take effort in our ability to wake up. If we don't become, if we don't observe ourselves, if we don't take part in self-remembering, then we're going to be in a constant mechanical or robotic state, and we have no idea why. So we must do it. That is the model of awakening. Okay, how to stay awake. And I've gave you 3 different models there. You take your favourite one. Personally, I like Gurdjieff. I think the 8 circuits is really cool, but I tend to use it less. And then the map of consciousness I use pretty much every single day. But that is how to awaken. Now, what about purpose? How do you find your purpose? There's 3 ways you can find your purpose. First way, childhood. Look back at your childhood and see what you enjoyed. I loved learning. For some reason, I just enjoyed finding out truths and secrets of the world. It really excited me. It still excites me now. It's why I'm so focused on understanding the human condition and going deep, deep, deep within it and exploring all these different realms of possibility and trying to map it in a way that makes sense. Because that makes me incredibly happy. And I've been doing that since I was little, understanding the world. Why is it the way it is? How can we change it? I never accepted the response, it is what it is. I never accepted that. I always believed that there was a way to change anything I wanted to change. The second way is meditation. Or, of course, hemisync. By going into deep meditative states, by staying still with ourselves, we're able to receive messages, symbols, meaning from the divine source and get that knowledge. And last but by no means least, psychedelics. These are the 3 ways. Psychedelics, listen, if you want to go take a load of shrooms, make sure that you set yourself the intention of finding out what your purpose is. If you don't do that, you'll get a different message, which is fine. Just be ready for a different message, okay? And remember, you can only find your purpose, you can only find out what that purpose is once you've actually dealt with those lower centres. Or at least you've taken aim at awakening. Something else I want to mention about purpose, just while I've got you on, is that a lot of people believe that you can't pursue purpose and make money. Now, I believe that view is completely wrong. In fact, once you begin to ascend to higher levels of consciousness, when you're not dealing with the day-to-day, when you pursue your purpose, money flows to you naturally. Ideas around how you can monetize or how you can create something around that purpose will come to you. Help will come to you. But you have to take aim at waking up. If you don't wake up, you're going to be stuck in the same patterns you were in before. There is no change, there is no transformation in your life without first taking aim at yourself. Personal transformation. That's where it starts. You must change your inner before the outer world changes. That's the way it works. So it's always worked. Now, when you find your purpose, the next part of this is to find others that are also aligned with that. And this is where you can begin to use our old favourite, organised action. Listen, you don't have to get away from the world in order to live a fulfilling, aligned, awakened life. You don't need to do that. There's so many other people also on this same journey, also on this same path. They're going about their lives, also taking organised action. They're trying the hardest to change the world or change themselves or change their community for the better. Now, what is it when we all work together and take organised action? What's it called? It's the old favourite word, politics. That's all it is. It's when we recognise the only way to get what we want in the world is through working together in harmony to better the world and better ourselves. It's not about being alone, not about consuming, not about rejecting those 4 areas of control or power that I mentioned to you before. It's not about that. It's about recognising what these are, that they're energy, that they're systems, whether they can be used for good or for ill, and that's it. Politics is just the science of working together as a cohesive, harmonic whole. That is all it is. And you don't have to stop doing that just because you want to live a life of purpose. In fact, you typically start doing that when you start leading a life of purpose. You just have to be careful. You just have to be careful with what you associate with and who you associate with. All right? Because when you're living a life of purpose with others, then you create bonds. Those bonds are created together in the pursuit of something more than our singular parts. That's what it means to organise. You bring your individual purpose together with others for the harmonious working. And if you don't have something to work on, you must focus on what that is. You must find it. The human being is designed to search for goals, to create and to build, if you're a man. And it is to nurture and protect if you're a woman. Ignore that at your peril. Remember, we're physical beings. We have physical desires and physical needs. They have to be tended to. My best advice that I can give you on finding purpose is once you've found your purpose, find a community and actively engage within it. And it will lead you to even greater development of the centres or the circuits, whatever you want to call it. And it will challenge you to grow in ways you haven't even realised. That is the importance of purpose. Last, but by no means least, is to be conscious. We've done awake, we've done purpose, and it's time for conscious. It's connecting to your higher self. To be truly conscious is to reject the game, the ladder that we talked about before. To reject this. To reject this system of control. That is what it means to be conscious. But it's not to reject the world. The world is not the system. And the system is not the world. You can reject the system and the players, but not humanity. When you're conscious, you have the power to not only create and author your life, but also your destiny, your personality, your reactions. Nothing is off the table, and everything can be changed, adjusted, or adapted to suit your needs. And I know that if I wanted to play the game, I could do it because I understand it. If I wanted to become anything, I can become it. All I have to do is think it, work on myself, and slowly I will transform using my conscious effort. This is what it means to harness your imagination. That oh so important word that I will keep coming back to again and again and again. To harness this power of your imagination. If you can think of it, you can become it. Reality really is whatever you want it to be. Which is why, rather than going off and shunning the world, you must create your own systems, your own ways of measuring success and happiness. I have created a new game for myself. And my measurements, the thing that I measure every single day is how much have I helped others today? How much time have I spent in pursuit of my purpose today? Where have I been emotionally today? How long have I been awake for today? And the reason why those are my measurements is because I think I've mentioned this at the very beginning of this. I'm 27. And anything that I've put my mind to, I have succeeded. I've done. Whether it is making 100 grand a month in what we call revenue in my business, whether it is getting into politics in the UK. I worked with the education secretary in the UK by the time I was 21. I own my own home. Everything that I've wanted externally from me, I have achieved. And honestly, it wasn't even really that hard. And when there is barely any challenge in the world, you must look elsewhere for challenge. And what challenges me is self-growth. What challenges me is self-understanding. What challenges me is getting a grip or a feel of what is hard to grip or feel, the ethereal. What challenges me is understanding how the world works and how the world functions. That is what challenges me. And I have had the wool lifted over my eyes. In fact, there's a famous analogy which is called Plato's cave. Plato's cave is where you've got, say you're in a cave, and you've got lots of people in this cave. Okay, lots of people in this cave. And all these people can see is shadows on the wall. And they're locked. They're locked in this cave, okay? They've got chains on them and stuff. This is all they can see. This is all they can experience is these chains on the wall, okay? And one day, someone finally escapes. And when they escape, they're blinded. They're blinded by light. They're blinded by the light of the world. And for the first time, they see grass, they see clouds, they see creatures, they see trees, they see everything. But first, they're blinded. They can't see anything. It takes them time to adjust. But they see. For the first time, they see. And once they become giddy, drunk on this world, they finally see enlightenment. They finally get it. They return. They go back into the cave to try and bring others with them. But the challenge is, how do you describe a bird to people who've got no idea about what a bird is? How can you describe the sun to people who've never seen sunlight? How can you describe it? You can't. It's very difficult. So what will these people do? They'll kill you. They will kill you for interfering with their shadow. This project has been me making a choice. My choice is I have shown you how I think the world works. It must be around 8 hours, 9 hours worth of videos by now. How I believe the world functions. Irrespective of what other people think, it's just what I think. Hopefully it's helped some people. Maybe no one will see it. Who knows? I don't know. But I need to do something. Because I've spent time here and I wanted to come back down and share with people here. And that's what it means to be conscious, to choose. And this 8 hours, 9 hours, however long it is, has been about your choice. Your choice, right now, in this moment. And that choice is between 3 options. And both of these options lead to exactly the same place. The game, the system. Whether you acknowledge that you will be an eternal slave and pursue pleasure, or whether you will risk it all and play the game, it doesn't matter to me. As long as you make the choice. As long as you choose. Or maybe you'll reject the game completely. Like what I've done. And once you reject the game, you become bored. Once you play it long enough, you get bored. And you could just change it and make a new one. I've walked away from my political career. My traditional political career, anyway. I've walked away from 2 successful businesses, romantic relationships, friendships. I've walked away from them all, time and again, because they no longer serve me. Because when I got these things, I realised it wasn't what I actually wanted. It didn't fulfil me in the way I thought it would, because only one thing can do that. Only one thing can fulfill you forever. And that is a connection to the divine. Let me tell you right now, if you take the blue pill, the difficulty in your life will be a life of powerlessness. You will be at the behest of others for your entire life. The red pill, you'll be fighting your entire life. You'll be aware of the choice that you made. You will author your life. But the sacrifice will be the most damning of all. You will sacrifice your soul. You will sacrifice yourself in the pursuit of the material. Both of these are material choices. Or you take the white pill. A connection to the divine. A connection to your higher self. That is the choice I've made. And look, I'm not going to sit here and say to you at 27, I've got it all figured out. I haven't. This is the truth as I see it now that I'm documenting for you all to see. Let's be clear. I'm on my own path, my own journey, and my thoughts and opinions, they're probably going to change and develop, and hopefully they will. Look, for example, I mentioned you shouldn't reject money, you shouldn't reject religion, you shouldn't reject education, or information, or imagination. You shouldn't reject these things just because they control people. It's just like electricity. In the right hands, they can do wonderful things. Which is why I'm interested in finance at the minute. I really want to explore and understand finance and how it works. Stocks, shares, trading, betting, all kinds of financial instruments. Why? Because I can feel that emotionally these areas trigger something in me. I've often said, if ever I enter a casino, I wouldn't leave it again. I've often said, if ever I enter a casino, I wouldn't leave it again. That some part of me would remain there. You know, in 2017, I made over £10,000 trading crypto. But my brain was just all over the place. I had no emotional detachment. And so I lost nearly all of it as quickly as I made it. And that tells me that I have work to do in that area. So guess what? At some point, I'll probably start exploring it and understanding how I react to these things and go even deeper with that relationship to myself. There is no destination. There is no ending. The point of it is the journey. That is the point. And the journey never ends. You never finish. You never make it. But you're always full. You're always fulfilled. And as long as you remain true to yourself and remain true to the connection you've made within yourself, then this is the alternative. This is the way of the awakened. So, if you want a life of being an outcast, of deep inner work and introspection, a life of seeing through the world and other people seeing you as strange, for being able to see and witness what's going on, then choose the white pill. But at least choose. At least choose.